All right, first and foremost, happy Indigenous Peoples Day. It used to be called Christopher Columbus Day, but we off that now. Now it's Happy Indigenous Peoples Day. And shout out to all my Indigenous peoples, wherever you're at in the world, whatever continent and country, whatever nation, whatever tribe you're a part of. Much love, peace, prayers, positive energy, all that good stuff to you and yours from me and mine. I am Rami Salam El, Indigenous, Moorish American. Thank you for watching. Thank you for joining us. We have a Moorish history lesson today. We're going to be talking about Christopher Columbus, the Doctrine of Discovery, and a whole lot of other things. But before we get to that, first I want to lay the foundation. I want to put some definitions on the table so we understand what's going on, and also the names of the papal bulls, some documents that we're going to be referring to as we continue on with this, just so that people have a good foundation and a good understanding of what's being said and the words that are being used. If you don't care about the definitions, or if you already know the words, just skip ahead about 5 minutes and just get right into the video. But this section right here is just to give people a better understanding of some of the words that are going to be used in the footage that you see, and also in the documents that are going to be read from. So we have perpetual slavery on the table, Saracens on the table, pagans, heathens, Moor, infidels, discovery and law, and ethnic. We're gonna touch on ethnic, but we'll start with Saracens. And today I'm going to be reading from the New Oxford American Dictionary. I encourage you all to look up these words for yourself in multiple dictionaries also, so that you can get a good understanding of what the word means. And sometimes in certain dictionaries it doesn't have the complete definition, so it's important to look in multiple dictionaries if you have the chance. And so for Saracen, the definition for Saracen, it is on page 1513, an Arab or Muslim, especially at the time of the Crusades, a nomad of the Syrian and Arabian desert at the time of the Roman Empire. But the key right there, an Arab or Muslim, especially at the time of the Crusades. And the Crusades, that time frame, matter of fact, the Great Crusades, and this is coming from the University of Michigan, is listed as 1095 to 1291. Some other people that say 1095 to 1258, but let's just say from the year 1095 to about the 1300s, or 1300. So especially during that time, that was when the word Saracen was used, and it was referring to an Arab or Muslim, especially at the time of the Crusades. We'll get to that in a second and why it's important, but I just wanted to put that on the table. Pagans. I wanted to look up pagans because that is also a word used. Pagan. Pagan is on page 1227, is defined as a person holding religious beliefs other than those of the main world religions. A non-Christian, an adherent of neo-paganism, of or relating to such people or beliefs of pagan god. And down in origin, the etymology, it says Latin paganus also meant civilian, becoming in Christian Latin heathen. So pagan also, it has a reference to heathen, and it was also referring to a non-Christian. That is very important. And then heathen is page 786. 786, heathen. Heathen, and this here is listed 786, a person who does not belong to a widely held religion, especially one who is not Christian, Jew, or Muslim, as regarded by those who do. Heathen people collectively, especially in biblical use, those who did not worship the God of Israel. And then informal, it says heathen as an unenlightened person, a person regarded as lacking culture or moral principles. And then a little bit further, it says informal also, it says unenlightened or uncivilized. Very key, very key. And I'm highlighting these for a specific reason, and we'll see as it unfolds. And we're going to go back a little bit. We're going to look up infidels, and that's infidel, page 869. A person who does not believe in religion or who adheres to a religion other than one's own. Adhering to a religion other than one's own. All right. And then in the etymology section for infidel, it says the word originally denoted a person of a religion other than one's own, specifically a Muslim to a Christian to a Muslim, or a Gentile to a Jew. So if you were a Muslim, Christians would be considered infidels. If you were Christian, Muslims would be considered infidels. And then let's go quickly to more, just to put more on the table. You should know what that means, more is out there, but just in case you don't, we got to put it on the table. And it all comes into play. More was 1107, page 1107. More, a member of a northwestern African Muslim people of mixed Berber and Arab descent. In the 8th century, they conquered the Iberian Peninsula, but were finally driven out of their last stronghold in Granada at the end of the 15th century. So that would be the end of the 15th century, 1490s, somewhere around there. We're going to get to it. And again, a member of the Muslim people of mixed Berber and Arab descent. That's the definition of Moor. And just a reference back to Saracen, Saracen was an Arab or Muslim, especially at the time of the Crusades. Now, the Crusades we referenced was 1095 to, I think, said 1258. The Moors, this was speaking, this time frame was the 8th century, so that's 700s, to the 15th century, the 1400s. So there's some overlap between Moor and Saracen in the time frame, and we'll get to that in a moment. Now let's get to the legal definition of discovery. Real quick, we got two more, and then we're going to get up out of there, and then get to the text. The legal definition of discovery, and the reason I'm looking that up is because we are going to be going into the doctrine of discovery, and also about how Christopher Columbus discovered the New World and discovered America, quote unquote. And I think it is important for us to get some context on what that word means in law. And this is coming from Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition, page 552. Discovery. In a general sense, the ascertainment of that which was previously unknown, the disclosure or coming to light of what was previously hidden, the acquisition of notice or knowledge of given facts or facts, as in regard to the discovery of fraud affecting the running of the statute of limitations or the granting of a new trial for newly discovered evidence. But what I wanted to specifically focus on is what it means in international law. And in international law, it says, as the foundation for a claim of national ownership or sovereignty, discovery is the finding of a country, continent, or island previously unknown or previously known only to its uncivilized inhabitants. That word uncivilized, we're gonna keep coming back to that word. But one last definition, and this is actually coming from the Barnhart Dictionary of Etymology, and I just wanted to put this on the record for ethnic. And this was, I didn't write the page down, but ethnic. This is page 345. About 1375, it was known to mean heathen or pagan. Ethnic was known to mean heathen or pagan. Probably borrowed directly from a translation of New Testament Greek, the heathen from ethnos, a people, nation, Gentiles, a translation of Hebrew goyim. Wow. The sense of a member of a racial, cultural, or national minority group. It's first recorded in 1945. Wow. I didn't read that other part beforehand. That kind of threw me off. But the reason I wanted to highlight this, just in context, the word ethnic, such as ethnic studies. But ethnic, if you go back to its original meaning, meant heathen or pagan. Very interesting. And then we know what heathen and pagan means in reference to, and we'll continue to reference back to those. But for now that we have the definitions in place, I also just want to put on the record the names of the papal bulls that we're going to be referencing. And there's three main ones that I'm going to focus on. And papal bulls, if you don't know, it's spelled P-A-P-A-L-B-U-L-L-S, like bulls. The first one is Dum Diversas, D-U-M space D-I-V-E-R-S-A-S. And this was issued June 18th, 1452. The next one that we're going to be referring to is Romanus Pontifex, R-O-M-A-N-U-S P-O-N-T-I-F-E-X. And this one was issued January 8th, 1454. And the last papal bull that we're going to be focusing on is the Inter Caetera, and this is I-N-T-E-R space C-A-E-T-E-R-A, and this was issued May 4th, 1493. So just to sum it up before we get to the videos, those three documents, those papal bulls, Dum Diversas, Romanus Pontifex, and Inter Caetera, those are the three main papal bulls that we're going to be referencing and referring to. And then also to look out for the terms Saracens, pagans, heathens, discovery, obviously, infidels, and perpetual, I think I said perpetual slavery, but I actually meant perpetual servitude. So listen for that term. But what that term means is just servitude or quote unquote slavery with no end. It just perpetuates, it just goes on and on and on. So listen to those terms as we listen to these videos and watch these videos. And then once those are over, I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna read. I have some things highlighted from the different papal bulls that I'm gonna read, and then we're gonna sum it all up. So yeah, let's get to the videos.
The point I want to make is the part of the country we're in and the part of the country that many of you, or the part of the world, excuse me, that many of you are from, are areas that Spain colonized and Spain claimed. And Spain claimed it under the Doctrine of Discovery that this whole conference is about. What is it? How can we work to get rid of it and to roll back the negative impacts of it? One point I want to drive home to you is that Spain was very legalistic in its application of the Doctrine of Discovery. Far more than any other of the colonial powers, England, France, even Portugal, etc., in North America and Central and South America, Spain applied law that they drafted repeatedly, and I will cover some of these issues. But what I'm going to start out with is, of course, the international law of discovery that we call the Doctrine of Discovery. I'm going to explain it very, very quickly. Talk about the 10 elements that I define or that I have perceived make up the Doctrine of Discovery, and then I will try to point out how Spain applied that in Central South America and this southwest part of what is now the United States. So the Doctrine of Discovery, and that name Doctrine of Discovery, comes from the first United States Supreme Court case about Indian issues and tribal issues. The United States Supreme Court decided in Johnson v. McIntosh that North America was settled by the English primarily under the Doctrine of Discovery and Conquest. What did that mean for native peoples, for the indigenous peoples of North America? Well, the court said they immediately lost some of the rights to their land. Magically, without any consent, without any consultation, without any payment, or even without knowledge of indigenous peoples, they lost the full ownership of their land under Anglo-American or English and American property law. What else did the Doctrine of Discovery do to indigenous peoples? Well, they immediately lost, again, without their knowledge or their consent or any agreement with these Europeans that showed up, they immediately and magically lost some of their sovereign powers. the right, according to the United States Supreme Court, to engage in international diplomacy and international trade were the two primary examples the court talks about. So somehow, just because Europeans showed up with their flag and their cross and planted it in the soil, they were making a legal claim. And I want you to remember, the Doctrine of Discovery is about law. In fact, the Doctrine of Discovery is probably the first form of international law that was developed. Gosh, what is international law? Well, it's the agreements that the international community develops how governments will interact with governments. That's really a good definition even today of international law. So how did these European countries decide among themselves to divide up the world? Boy, that's pretty nice. Steve, you and I ought to define how to divide someone's house out here. So if you and I can just agree on it, then we can, take your property. Wow, what a unique thing. But this case has been enormously important. It's been cited dozens and dozens and dozens of times by the courts in Canada, by the courts in Australia, by the courts in New Zealand. It's even been cited 3 times by what's called the English Privy Council, which is the highest Supreme Court in the United Kingdom in England. Always cited about colonization and the power of the white, non-indigenous government to control the indigenous peoples. I'm not going to explain that opinion anymore because we just don't have time. What I'm going to explain to you briefly are the 10 elements that I, after reading Johnson v. McIntosh 50 times, these are the justifications, the 10 elements that make up, I think, the doctrine, the international law doctrine of discovery. First, and this was primarily developed by the Catholic Church and by Spain and Portugal. Starting in the 1340s, primarily being solidified in 1436, when Pope Eugenius II issued, I believe, the first papal bull about actual colonization and European power outside of Europe, granted the Canary Islands to Portugal to control and convert the wild men, that's quote unquote, the wild men of the Canary Islands. The Canary Island peoples were denigrated by the Spanish and the Portuguese. You can read the identical definitions of what were said about American Indians and the indigenous peoples around the rest of the world by Spain and Portugal. Why these Canary Island people have no law, they have no agriculture, they have no clothes, they have no money, they don't speak our language, they don't have laws. Well, the vast majority of those things were lies, weren't they? But those were the same kind of justifications that have always been described about American Indians and indigenous peoples elsewhere, to lower. Literally, folks, that's one of the elements of racism, of the definition of racism, is to somehow set yourself apart from the other and then to lower in your valuation the way they live or their law or their ethics. And that's exactly what the Spanish and the Portuguese were doing. Boy, I'm going to need more than 30 minutes. I'm still on element 1, aren't I?
So, for those who don't know, the Doctrine of Discovery, it's essentially a series of papal bulls written between 1452 and 1493. It's the church in Europe saying to the nations of Europe, wherever you go, whatever lands you find not ruled by Christian rulers, those people are less than human and the land's yours for the taking. So it says stuff like invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens and pagans whatsoever. Reduce them to perpetual slavery. I mean, this was literally the doctrine that let European nations go into Africa, colonize the continent, and enslave the African people. They weren't fully human. This is the same doctrine that let Columbus, who was lost at sea, land in this new world that was inhabited by millions and claimed to have discovered it. Because the bias was, the implicit racial bias was, we weren't fully human. I mean, if you think about it, you cannot discover lands already inhabited. That's called stealing, conquering, colonizing. Because what we call it today, we teach it today, what Columbus did was discovery. It reveals the implicit racial bias of the nation, which is natives aren't fully human. So the challenge with this doctrine, and what people aren't aware of, is that it's been embedded into the foundations of the country. So the Declaration of Independence, 30 lines below the statement, all men are created equal, it refers to natives as merciless Indian savages, making it very clear the only reason they said all men is because our founding fathers had a very narrow definition of who actually was and who was not human. The Constitution begins with the inclusive terms, we the people. Just a few lines below that, Article 1, Section 2, it defined who's a citizen of this nation, who we the people includes. It never mentions women. It specifically excludes natives, and it counts Africans as 3/5 of a person. So we the people literally meant white landowning men. And then it got further embedded in 1823 when there was a case called Johnson versus McIntosh. This is two men of European descent. They're litigating over a single piece of land. One of them acquired the land from the government. The other got it from a native tribe. They want to know who owned it. The case goes all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court had to decide the principle upon which land titles were based. They concluded that discovery was the principle that gave title to the land. And then they used the Doctrine of Discovery. They referenced it as a legal instrument to determine that based on the Doctrine of Discovery, natives, who are less than human, only had the right of occupancy to land, while Europeans had the right of discovery to the land and therefore the true title to it. So this created, along with a few other cases during that era, the martial court era, created the legal precedent for land titles. And this precedent and the Doctrine of Discovery gets referenced by the court as recently as 2005. So we're not talking about ancient history, centuries old. This is affecting our lives today. This Doctrine of Discovery it's used in our court systems today because it's the legal precedent, it's the worldview, it's the understanding that our founding documents were written out of and built on.
सेंट्रल अमेरिका, इसमें अलग अलग देशों में जाएंगे, लेकिन बड़े मजेदार कहानी है. 1493 में एक पेपल बुल यानी कि एक पेपल डॉक्यूमेंट रिलीज होता है, हाँ, इंटर कैटेरा नाम का. इससे इस डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ डिस्कवरी प्रोमलगेट होती है. कितने लोगों को पता है इसके बारे में, डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ डिस्कवरी? ये बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण है. दिस इज द बेसिस ऑफ द कॉलोनाइजेशन ऑफ द अमेरिकाज एंड रियली ऑफ द वर्ल्ड. क्या कहता है पेपल बुल? वैसे तो ये जो सारे पेपल बुल्स हैं ये बहुत लोकल पॉलिटिक्स से जुड़े हुए हैं, यानी कि स्पेनिश किंग ने कुछ चाहा, पोर्चुगीज किंग ने कुछ चाहा, तो वो ये पोप्स हैं, ये उनका दलाली या उनकी वो सब कर रहे हैं, ये काम है. लेकिन उसका थियोलॉजिकल बेसिस बता रहे हैं. थियोलॉजिकल बेसिस क्या है कि द क्रिश्चियन गॉड ओन्स द अर्थ, यानी कि सारी की सारी अर्थ है वो क्रिश्चियन गॉड की है. और जो भी लोग क्रिश्चियन नहीं हैं उनको या तो वो स्क्वाटर्स हैं, बेसिकली दे आर इलीगली ऑक्यूपाइंग इट, तो या तो उसको क्रिश्चियन बनाया जाए या उनको मारा जाए. दो ही ऑप्शन है. तो जब ये पहुंचते हैं स्पेनियर्ड्स वहां पे साउथ अमेरिका में, ये अपना पेपल बुल दिखाते हैं और स्पेनिश किंग की प्रोक्लेमेशन दिखाते हैं, कह रहे हैं ये सारा लैंड हमारा है. नेटिव्स उनको देखते हैं, यार ये क्या ले रहा है, ये कहाँ से ले आए पेपर, ये क्या चीज़ है, ये कहाँ, तुम कौन हो लोग तुम, हा? लेकिन नहीं, वो हमारे पास पीस ऑफ पेपर है, तुम्हारा कहाँ पेपर है कि ये लैंड तुम्हारा है. उन्होंने कहा लैंड किसका हो सकता है, हम तो मर जाएंगे, लैंड तो फिर भी यहाँ पे होगा, हम कैसे लैंड को ओन कर सकते हैं, ये जरा समझाओ. लेकिन वो कह रहे नहीं, हमारे पास डीड है, लैंड की डीड है, तुम इलीगल ऑक्यूपेंट्स हो. बिकॉज द थियोलॉजी जस्टिफाइज दिस, देयरफॉर जेनोसाइड कैन नाउ बी जस्टिफाइड. After all, how do you make people, normal people are good people, bad people, like normal people, how do you make normal people carry out a genocide on this scale? 100 million people were killed in the Americas over generations. How do you make people carry out a genocide? You tell them it is from God. It is on the authority of God, and you're doing a good thing because you're either because either they're satanic. If they have not accepted Christ, they're satanic, so they should be killed, or they have to be converted. So either case, you're doing God's work.
Now, I hope those videos help to paint a better picture, give some more context to help you really understand, why they use the word discovered and the legal implications. behind these papal bulls and this quote-unquote doctrine of discovery, and how it affects us right now. Not just in the past, not just, oh, what Columbus and them did. Nah, it affects us to this day. As a matter of fact, I'm going to read an article about it. Well, I'm going to do that last. But let me read some highlights from those papal bulls just to put on the record. But I also want to say that if you're watching this, I humbly and sincerely encourage you to read all of these papal bulls, the Dum Diversas, the Inter Caetera, all of this stuff for yourself. Don't believe me just because you see it on the screen or just because it sounds good. Read it for yourself so that you can know for yourself, not just so you're told. That being said, let me just read just a couple excerpts, just real quick. I'm gonna try to breeze through these if I can. And this first one is I'm gonna just go chronologically. Dum Diversas, and I'm gonna just read from the top here. It says, "Greetings and apostolic blessing. While we turn over in our mind the diverse concerns of the office of the apostolic service entrusted to us by celestial providence, concerns by which we are every day urgently pressed, we are also moved by a persistent encouragement. We chiefly carry in our heart that the well-known anxiety, that the rage of the enemies of the name of Christ, always aggressive in contempt of the Orthodox faith, could be restrained by the faithful of Christ and be subjugated, okay, quote unquote, subjugated to the Christian religion." All right, this is first paragraph, right out the gate. Second paragraph, "As we indeed understand from your pious and Christian desire, you intend to subjugate the enemies of Christ, namely the Saracens, and bring them back with powerful arm to the faith of Christ, if the authority of the apostolic see supported you in this. Therefore, we consider that those rising against the Catholic faith and struggling to extinguish Christian religion must be resisted by the faithful of Christ with courage and firmness, so that the faithful themselves, inflamed by the ardor of faith and armed with courage to be able to hate their intention, not only to go against their intention, if they prevent unjust attempts of force, but with the help of God, whose soldiers they are, they stop the endeavors of the faithless. We, fortified with divine love, summoned by the charity of Christians and bound by the duty of our pastoral office, which concerns the integrity and spread of faith, for which Christ our God shed his blood, wishing to encourage the vigor of the faithful and your royal majesty in the most sacred intention of this kind, we grant to you full and free power, through the apostolic authority by this edict, to invade, conquer, fight, subjugate the Saracens and pagans and other infidels and other enemies of Christ, and wherever establish their kingdoms, duchies, royal palaces, principalities, and other dominions, lands, places, estates, camps, and any other possessions, mobile or immobile goods, found in all these places, and held in whatever name, and held and possessed by the same Saracens, pagans, infidels, and the enemies of the Christ, also realms, duchies, royals, palaces, principalities, and other dominions, lands, places, estates, camps, possessions of the king or prince, or of the king of princes, and to lead their persons in perpetual servitude, and to apply and appropriate realms, duchies, royals, possessions, and goods of this kind to you and your use and your successors, the kings of Portugal." I want to highlight to subjugate the Saracens, okay? To invade, conquer, fight, subjugate the Saracens, pagans, and other infidels. And then at the top, that they intend to subjugate the enemies of the Christ, namely the Saracens. Namely the Saracens. And again, we go back to that. And I just want to highlight, and you have to understand when we're talking about in history, back in those times, our people were referred to by different names. Moor, obviously, but also Saracen, also Arab, also Berber, also Muslim. This is all during the Golden Age of Islam, the Crusades, the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages in Europe. During this time, our people were referenced by different names. Much like in today's time, our people are known as blacks, African Americans, colored, Negroes, Afro Americans, people of color. All of those different various names referring to the same people. Well, back then, it had various names, but it was still referring to the same people, Moors. And here it's called Saracens. Let's see. Yeah, that we'll end it on Dum Diversas on that one. Let's move to the Roman Pontifex. Where is that at there? Roman Pontifex. And I got a couple highlighted, just three real quick. First paragraph. It says, this we believe will more certainly come to pass through the aid of the Lord, if we bestow suitable favors and special graces on those Catholic kings and princes who, like athletes and intrepid champions of the Christian faith, as we know by the evidence of facts, not only restrain the savage excesses of the Saracens and of other infidels, enemies of the Christian name, but also for the defense and increase of the faith, vanquish them and their kingdoms and habitations, through situated in the remote parts unknown to us, and subject them to their own temporal dominion, sparing no labor expense, in order that those kings and princes, relieved of all obstacles, may be more animated to the prosecution of so solitary and laudable work. Down a little bit further, third paragraph. Moreover, since some time ago it had come to the knowledge of the said Infante that never, or at least not within the memory of men, had it been customary to sail on this ocean sea toward the southern and eastern shores, and that it was so unknown to us Westerners that we had no certain knowledge of the peoples of those parts, believing that he would best perform his duty to God in this matter, if by his effort and industry that sea might become navigatable as far as to the Indians, who are said to worship the name of Christ, and that thus he might be able to enter in relation with the Indians, and to incite them to aid the Christians against the Saracens and other such enemies of faith, and might also be able forthwith to subdue certain Gentile or pagan peoples living between, who are entirely free from infection by the sect of the most impious Mahomet, and that's spelled Mahhomet, which is a version of Muhammad, as in Islam, Prophet Muhammad, and to preach and cause to be preached to them the unknown but most sacred name of Christ, strengthened, however, always by the royal authority. He has not ceased for 25 years past to send almost yearly an army of the peoples of the said kingdoms, with the greatest labor, danger, and expense, in very swift ships called caravels, to explore the sea and coastlands toward the South and Antarctic Pole. Yeah, I'll keep moving on. And then we therefore, in the fourth paragraph, we therefore, where was that at? 1 second. And we therefore, weighing all and singular the premises with due meditation, and noting that since we have formerly by other letters of ours granted, among other things, free and ample faculty to the aforesaid King Alfonso to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens and pagans whatsoever. All Saracens. And Saracen is another word for Moors. So all Moors and pagans, people who are not Christians, infidels, people who are not Christians, subdue all Saracens and pagans whatsoever, and other enemies of Christ wheresoever placed, and the kingdoms, dukedoms, principalities, dominions, possessions, and all movable and immovable goods, whatsoever held and possessed by them, and to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, and to apply and appropriate to himself and his successors the kingdoms, dukedoms, counties, principalities, dominions, possessions, and goods, and to convert them to his, and their use and profit. By having secured the said faculty, the said King Alfonso, or by his authority, the aforesaid infantate, justly and lawfully has acquired and possessed, and doeth possess these islands, lands, harbors, and seas. Yeah, I'll stop right there. Yeah. And then, so that was, let me just read that. Let me highlight that line again. To the aforesaid King Alfonso, to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens and pagans, and other enemies of the Christ. The other enemies of Christ. So all Saracens, all pagans, aka all Moors, whatsoever, subdue, subjugate, invade, search out, capture, vanquish. This is the document. Not my opinion, not how I feel about it, not my belief, factual information. I encourage you to look it up for yourself. Let me get to this last one, this last Papal Bull, Inter Caetera. That is Inter Caetera. And this one, just so that you understand the context, Inter Caetera, the division of the undiscovered world between Spain and Portugal, as you may have seen in the videos. And then it says, we have indeed learned, here we go. We have indeed learned that you, who for a long time had intended to seek out and discover certain islands and mainlands remote and unknown, and not hitherto discovered by others, to the end that you might bring to the worship of our Redeemer and the profession of the Catholic faith their residents and inhabitants, having been up to the present time greatly engaged in the seize and recovery of the kingdom itself of Granada. Understand, this is 1493. The Moors fell, and their last stronghold, Granada, 1492. They were at war with the quote-unquote Christians. The kingdom itself of Granada were unable to accomplish this holy and praiseworthy purpose, but the said kingdom, having at length been regained, and was pleasing to the Lord, you, with wish to fulfill your desire, choose our beloved son, Christopher Columbus, a man assuredly worthy and of the highest recommendations, and fitted for so great an undertaking, whom you furnish with ships and men equipped for like designs, not without the greatest hardships, dangers, and expenses, to make diligent quest for these remote and unknown mainlands and islands through the sea, where hitherto no one had sailed. And they at length, with divine aid and with the utmost diligence sailing in the ocean sea, discovered certain very remote islands and even mainlands that hitherto had not been discovered by others, wherein dwell very many peoples living in peace. This is the document. Again, Inter Caetera, read it for yourself. It's saying that they traveled to these lands and wherein dwelt, where there was very many people living in peace, and as reported, going unclothed and not eating flesh. Moreover, as your aforesaid envoys are of opinion, these very peoples living in the said islands and countries believe in one God, the Creator in heaven, and seem sufficiently disposed to embrace the Catholic faith and be trained in good morals. And so that was just some highlights of the Papal Bulls, the Dum Diversas, Inter Caetera, you feel me? But read all of those for yourself. Look up, and I put the links to the articles and links to the documents, the Papal Bulls, in the description. If you need them and you can't find the links, you can email me at iamhhtemple@gmail.com. Once again, iamhhtemple@gmail.com. But read these documents for yourself. Look into this information for yourself. Don't just believe me, or don't just believe people just because they tell you. That being said, I wanted to just summarize. I wanted to read a couple more things and then close it out. This is from the Golden Age of the Moor, Ivan Van Sertima, edited by Ivan Van Sertima, excuse me. And the section I'm reading from is page 331, titled The Moors and Portugal's Global Expansion. And it says, and this is from Leo Africanus, A Geographical History of Africa, 1600. The top, it says, for all the Negroes or black Moors are descendants of Cush, the son of Ham, who was the son of Noah. But whatever differences there is between the Negroes and the Tawny Moors, it is a fact that they are all of the same ancestry. That was in 1600. And then a little bit further down, it says, this study is not intended to prolong the discussion about who the Moors were or who they were not. Scholars who are not blinded by the fog of racism are of one voice that most of the Moors were Africoid in origin. Even many of the marauding Arabs who crossed the desert sands of Arabia and swept down with their Islamic fervor in northern regions of Africa, then crossing the Sahara and moving further southward. Massive miscegenation did alter the picture, producing people who were of all shades, from jet black to very near white, quote unquote. Dr. Chancellor Williams hits the nail on the head once and for all when he asks and answers the question. Now, again, just who were the Moors? The answer is very easy. The original Moors, like the original Egyptians, were quote-unquote black Africans. As amalgamation became more and more widespread, only the Berbers, Arabs, and coloreds in the Moroccan territories were called Moors, while the darkest and black-skinned Africans were called blackamoors. Eventually, black was dropped from blackamoor. In North Africa, and Morocco in particular, all Muslim Arabs, mixed breeds, and Berbers are readily regarded as Moors. The African blacks, having had even this name taken from them, must contend for recognition as Moors. The Golden Age of the Moor, Ivan Van Sertima, and then, boom, they came before Columbus, the African presence in ancient America, also by Ivan Van Sertima, and it has some amazing information. Speaks about Columbus, Christopher Columbus, that is, and him meeting with the King of Portugal, and some more context about the power grab between Spain and Portugal and them colonizing and taking over our ancestors' land. But I don't want to focus on that. That's whatever. Not whatever, but what I want to focus on, let me show you a couple pictures real quick, actually. Just real quick. Yeah, man. They got some pictures here of ancient Egypt and Nubia. All right. See that there? What else do we have? We got some of the Olmec heads in there. But I want to focus specifically on page 252. All right, 252. And it says, a thesis published in Algiers in 1930 by a French commandant, Jules Cavet, excuse me, I mispronounced that, lends further support to this suggestion. While involved in another study, Cavet noted that the ethnic names of certain Berber groups were the same as those of certain American Indian tribes. I'm going to read that again. The French commandant Cavet noted that the ethnic names of certain Berber groups, Berbers is another name for Moors, were the same as those of certain American Indian tribes. The Berbers are a mixed race of Arabs who live in North Africa. They originally came from North Asia, India, and the Caucasus, and also have mingled with Negroid tribes in the Sahara deserts. They lived in the medieval period at the northern boundary of the Mali Empire and paid allegiance to black emperors of Mali. Because of their original Asian background, before their intermingling with other Caucasoid and Negroid elements, Cavet found it necessary to cross-check Asian ethnic names to see whether these similar names among Berbers and the Americans arose as a consequence of simultaneous arrival of groups from Asia. This check could not explain these astonishing parallels. Few could be accounted for by virtue of the early Asiatic element in the Berber background. Listen carefully. Certain American ethnic names, Cavet said, are only duplicated among the Berbers. Certain American names are only duplicated among Berbers and are not found anywhere else in the world. Let that simmer for a second. Certain American ethnic names, certain names from the Americas are only found among Berbers and nowhere else. How is that? Come on, man. Certain other American names have undergone Berber transformations. The origin of a number of names is attested by the grouping of names of collectivities in the vicinity of their point of origin. I'm going to just leave it right there. To summarize, it's very important that we study history. It's very important that we understand law and understand that history and law go together. Very important that we understand that what we call ourselves matters. Study history. Study the Doctrine of Discovery. Study these Papal Bulls. Study what was really going on in 1492 and what happened before 1492. Before Christopher Columbus, quote unquote, discovered America. Really get into the facts about history and really truly find out what's going on. Because it involves you. Yes, you, Moore. Yes, you. I'm talking to you. And anybody else. It involves us all. All of this is connected. We got to study. We got to do the knowledge. Because as you saw in the clips, the Doctrine of Discovery is referenced in legal situations in the 2000s. It's like right now. It's not some past thing. And the last thing I wanted to highlight real quick is something I saw from the article. And this is from the United Nations, a press release in 2012. Doctrine of Discovery, used for centuries to justify the seizure of indigenous land, subjugates peoples, must be repudiated by the United Nations. Permanent form told. The Doctrine of Discovery has been used for centuries to expropriate indigenous lands and facilitate their transfer to colonizing or dominating nations. Speakers in the permanent forum on indigenous issues stress today, urging the expert body to study the creation of a special mechanism under the United Nations auspices to investigate historical land claims. And I just wanted to highlight something that was important. Indigenous and Native peoples spoke out against the continued use of the internationally recognized principle of terra nullius, TERRANULLIUS, which describes land belonging to no one but that could in some cases be acquired through occupation. It says such principles, as well as the anachronistic norms like the regalian doctrine, under which private land title emanates from the Spanish crown. Such principles were based on racist, unscientific assumptions, many said, and could not be used by states to justify the theft of native lands, territories, or natural resources. And I wanted to highlight the people that are involved in this, okay? It has a list of the group. It says, participating in the debate on the Doctrine of Discovery were representatives of the following: Asian Indigenous Peoples Caucus, Indigenous People of Africa Coordinating Committee, Pacific Indigenous Caucus, Latin American Indigenous Peoples Caucus, Indigenous Parliament of Venezuela, United Federation of Taino Peoples Project Access Global Training Caucus, International Indigenous Forum for Women, International Indian Treaty Council, the Maori Caucus, MAORI, or Maori, the San Caucus, the Onondaga Nation, Australia Human Rights Commission, Global Indigenous Youth Caucus, Indian Confederation of Indigenous and Tribal Peoples International, Northeast Zone, the Continental Network of Indigenous Women of the Americas, the National Native Title Council of Australia, and the Consejo Nacional de Alus y Marcas del... Oh, this is a tough one. I'm going to spell this last piece. QULLASUYU, Centro para la Autonomía y Desarrollo de los Pueblos Indígenas, and the North Africa Indigenous Caucus. A whole lot of people was involved in this. This is back in 2012. Did you notice a name that wasn't mentioned? Was there a Moorish American caucus? Was there a Moorish caucus? Was there a Moor caucus? We got to get on that. That's not on anybody else but us. Yeah. So I wanted to put that on the record. And there was another article I just seen that came out today as well. But that's enough for today. To my Moorish American brothers and sisters out there, please do your studying in your history. Learn about the law. Learn about these papal bulls. Learn about international law. We need to become more active in the United Nations and in the OAS and in other indigenous groups and committees and different events and engage and really engage the people and make ourselves known. We have to start taking our seat and what was it? Taking care of our affairs among men. You know what I'm saying. Y'all know what I'm saying. Yeah, that's it, man. Thank you for watching. If you watched this far, keep studying. And most importantly, love instead of hate. We got to get that hate out of our heart. You know what I mean? Get that hate out of our system. Even though our people was done wrong and they're still being done wrong. We can't harbor that hate. We can't keep that hate inside of us because it doesn't do anything for us. Much love. Keep shining. Peace.
Columbus now met an important monk, one who had influence at the Spanish court. The monk listened to Columbus' idea with great interest. Eventually, he arranged for Columbus to meet the King and Queen of Spain. At their first meeting, Queen Isabella was very impressed with Columbus. He spoke well, and his eyes shone with excitement as he explained his plan to reach the Indies. But in spite of this, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella did not want to act too quickly. They were deeply involved in an expensive war with the Moors. Page 20. A Christopher Columbus book by David Goodnow.
Why are we working together? Why is this so easy all of a sudden? Why is it so easy to understand all of a sudden? Because time's up. I mean, I'm 36 years old. I lived my whole life thinking I'm just black, or I was a Christian, or I was a this, or I was a that. I was a this, I'm a noob, you know what I mean? I'm a Kappa, you know what I mean? You know how it is, you know what we do. And the real thing is, man, you've been invaded. You've been invaded. The Pope gave them full permission and authority to search out and invade and take everything from us specifically here. It says to search out the people of the Indies. Read it, please read it. If you do nothing else tonight. It's only a paragraph. Read Dum Diversas. The Papal Bull 1452. So when they came and invaded, and when other people started making treaties with these invaders, it was a wrap. But they were given the power from their king. Is their king your king? Has their king declared rulership over you? Well, according to their documentation, yes. According to our power, there's only one.